A large house made of wood, surrounded by trees.
Welcome to Twin Peaks The Gifted.
And the Damned.
My name's Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at Fit and Trim. That's FITTENTRIM at Fit and Trim on Twitter. And with me, as always, the guy who in our very first podcast... introduced the world to the word sweeps.
Sweeps.
It's Mork.
Hey, man.
Mork, how you doing?
Finally, it paid off. I'm doing great. I feel vindicated. I feel like Lynch and Frost have been paying attention to the podcast, and they gave us... I mean, it was just a brief shot. You had to look really closely.
Right.
I think if you blinked for, I don't know...
Well,
8 or 9 minutes?
Close. I timed it out with the stopwatch on my phone.
All right, good.
It was 2 minutes and 10 seconds of sweeping. Now, there have been a lot of people out there who love Twin Peaks. People have little problems with the new show. One consistence has been the pacing. And I've seen people on Twitter saying, if you don't like the pacing, GTFO. And I want everybody to love Twin Peaks.
Me
so
too.
if anybody complains about the show, the only way they can't complain is because they're a Twin Peaks fan and they're watching it and they're enjoying it. And so I would wonder if these people who say they love the pacing would be willing to give up 2 minutes and 10 seconds of somebody sweeping so that maybe more Twin Peaks fans could really get on board, because I think we need to get right to our rankings. Today we're going to be covering Part 7 of Twin Peaks The Return. There's a body, all right.
There's a body, all right.
I want to get right to the rankings because until that sweeping scene, I was going to give this episode 10 out of 10.
Whoa.
I was heavily into it.
Okay.
And to be honest, the sweeping scene really hasn't crushed me too much.
All right.
But because of that and these endings, which I guess I'm getting used to, but I'm still not over the moon about, I am going to go down just a hair. But for those first 51 minutes of the show, I'm going to give this 9 double P's out of 10. Well,
double P's.
Double P is a term I like to pull out when I talk about poor policing. I love Andy. I think Andy is a great character. He's great on the show. I love him. But if you have a hit and run which killed a child and you find the truck, Andy, you got to bring him back to the station, the sheriff's station.
Right.
And so I still love where that scene is going. I love that things are beginning to tie together.
Sure.
9 out of 10. Really excited. That's my opinion. Let's go to you, Mork. Mork, what ranking are you going to give to Part 7?
I got to say, I have to give it 7 double S's.
Double S's?
Slow sweepers.
Oh, yeah.
7 slow sweepers. Yeah, no, I liked a lot of it. In a weird way, I actually felt some of the stuff was a little bit rushed, but we'll get into that. The sweeping, it didn't bother me so much. This is getting posted a little later than we normally do because Bubba and I watched the sweeping portion about 8 or 9 times. And the first 4 times, it seems really slow, but at 5 or 6, there's a larger metaphor that starts to kick in. I think if our double L's, loyal listeners will just watch the double S.
The slow sweeping. A dozen, maybe 2 dozen times. No spoilers. I think some of the next 11 episodes will become a lot more crystal clear if they do that. But if they don't, I understand. Now, I want to say, though, even the sweeping, and we're obviously making light of it a bit, this over 2 minutes of sweeping.
Oh, no.
Because it had music, I actually enjoyed it more than some of the other scenes that have happened in the parts with the jazzy...
With Booker T and the MGs.
Right.
Green Onions.
So I could enjoy the sweeping a bit more. But this brings me to a great point. Listeners, if you are like me, enjoying new Twin Peaks, but wondering, couldn't we get more of that great Twin Peaks music? There's a guy on YouTube. His name is Chris Holland. He's got these series of scenes where it's called New Twin Peaks Scene with Old Twin Peaks music. It's great to watch. To me, because I love that score so much, I find I enjoy the scenes a bit more. It's David Lynch and Mark Frost's creation. They can, show it the way they want to. But it is an interesting idea. Go to YouTube, search Chris Holland, or search New Twin Peaks Scene with Old Twin Peaks music.
Cool.
And it's really interesting to see it in that light.
That is interesting.
But today's episode, it did have some of the music. We had a great old music cue when we were looking at some of the trees in the forest there in the foggy mountains of Twin Peaks that I really loved. But I really liked this episode a lot. Before we dive into it, there are just a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, I want to thank our listeners. Listeners,
thank you.
You guys
Both of you.
You guys are great. we do a bunch of podcasts here on the Double P Podcast Network, and when the Game of Thrones show is up and running, our Game of Thrones downloads are actually a couple thousand more than our Twin Peaks downloads. But you guys leave so many great comments. We're doing this podcast to meet and talk about a show we love and to talk to other Twin Peaks fans. So you guys are leaving comments. It is so great. In a couple weeks, Showtime's not going to have an episode for 4th of July, and so we're going to have another feedback show where I'm going to try to compile the things you guys have been leaving on our Facebook page, facebook.com/double P podcast. That's the word double, the single letter P, the word podcast, plural. Facebook.com/double P podcast. I'm going to try to compile all the feedback we've gotten there because you guys are really great, and I hope you're enjoying it as we go along. And I just want to say that we got one new iTunes review this week, and it's from the wonderful country of Sweden, which I've sadly never been to.
Oh, well, you got to go now because Tommy Haag says, interesting and refreshing. 5 stars.
Ooh, thank you.
Wow, look at that. Tommy says, different take on Twin Peaks than a lot of other podcasts. Lots of trivia and new views from different angles than most of the others out there. Not just going episode by episode, which I've grown tired of. Great podcast. Thanks so much, Tommy. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Tommy. We did get one other bit of feedback, and it just really made me feel so good. It's from Angela Mills. She left this on our Facebook page. And Angela wrote,
love the Gifted
and the Damned
podcast, despite being way behind. It's made chemo way more pleasant to deal with since I've been started listening. Thanks for helping make a bad situation better. Oh my gosh. Well, we are very happy to help any way we can.
We can't imagine how difficult chemo is, Angela. So everybody on the Gifted
and the Damned
podcast, and hopefully listeners, say a prayer, send some good thoughts towards Angela as she's going through chemo. Hopefully she's enjoying this Twin Peaks, taking her mind off some of that for a bit. Oh,
absolutely.
Boy, it really...
Get better soon, Angela.
Listeners, you guys are great. We know our podcast is tricky. We know that we go from ridiculously silly to sometimes
very
hard.
Silly.
And if you enjoy that silliness, Mork and I, we do another podcast here on the network entitled... Got Your Milk! About a show on FX here in the States entitled The Strain, about the vampire apocalypse. And if you like us at our silly, the lowest silliness we get to,
yes,
check
and
us out.
Possibly drunkest, but
right.
still.
Check us out on the Got Your Milk podcast. It's really, really wonderful. All right. Oh, you know what? I feel a bit bad. You said 7. Was there anything besides the sweeping we've kind of mocked? Was there anything that could have boosted it a bit higher?
The sweeping itself didn't, I don't penalize the episode just for the sweep. There were a couple things that I was very curious about. Diane, who I love and I'm getting excited to see, I'm sort of dreading that this is all we're going to see of her. And because we saw, we just saw her once last week.
Right.
And then we spent some time with her. We saw her apartment. We saw, I assume, one of her many, many lovers.
Many admirers.
Many of her gentlemen callers. And then, boom, we're in South Dakota. Fuck you, Tammy. How?
Ouch.
Diane. My goodness.
Saucy mouth.
Saucy Diane. She was great, but I'm hoping this is not the only time we get to see her. So, no, overall, I liked a lot of it. It did feel a little rushed in some places.
Okay.
As much of the complaining I've done about, hey, I want to see these things get tied together a little more, this episode I'm complaining about, oh, man, they're tying it together too quickly.
I did not think that. I didn't think they were tying things together too quickly. It does feel a bit odd that here we are in part 7, and I know we're not even halfway through, but they do keep introducing so many new things. Now we have Beverly's husband, Tom Page, who's seemingly in chemo himself, going through some rough times.
He's not doing well.
And so the fact they keep introducing new thoughts, new ideas, the episode ended on a new idea of, hey, where's Bink?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Where's Bing? Bing the sweeper.
We don't even... I think Bing is the sweeper.
Yeah.
In the credits is listed as Riley Lynch, who was in a couple episodes ago with his band playing there at the Roadhouse. When he played with his band in the Roadhouse, he didn't have a beard. The sweeper looked like he had a beard.
Right.
It's tough to say, but...
Well, he probably gets hassled a lot in Twin Peaks.
Right, because he's such a cool band.
It's such a cool band. They haven't really broken nationally, but in Twin Peaks, he can't, he still has to pay the bills. So if everyone can recognize him, he can't get much sweeping done, and he'll get fired by Jean-Michel Renaud.
Yeah, who knew?
We finally named. He looks a lot like Jacques, but...
He does. And people on Twitter were joking, is Hodor now working at the Roadhouse?
Oh, man. Oh, Hodor, I don't think would be as nearly as good of a pimp as Jean-Michel.
As Jean-Michel. So when we begin our recap and review, we're going to start where the episode starts in Twin Peaks, and we're going to go through all the great Twin Peaks stuff at once. It begins with somebody who, of the old cast members, has now appeared in his third part. Mm-hmm. Jerry Horne getting some love, even though he is lost out in the woods.
He seems to be a little bit lost. Now, I did notice that he was wearing something that Dr. Amp was not wearing recently. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
He is.
In the middle of the forest. This does not seem to be a particularly important forest in terms of the mythology as far as
well,
we
it doesn't
know.
have any recognizable symbols.
It's not
we should point out that in the original show, it was mainly shot here in Los Angeles. So I believe this forest, just looking from it, is an actual Pacific Northwest forest as opposed to some of the forests around here. One of the things I did think, though, is it possible, here Jerry is talking about, I'm here, I don't know how I got here, what happened, in its own crazy way. Isn't that what happened to, in some ways, Major Briggs when he got abducted in the way back when in the original series? The story that we've heard about Margaret and Carl Rod, both from the show and from Mark Frost's book, The Secret History. People getting abducted and kind of just showing up later in the woods. I have to be honest, I also was kind of laughing and giggling in the scene. I don't know if we were, maybe because Lynch decided not to give us that music, which would sometimes cue us as to the mood of a scene. I was actually laughing when it could have actually been something very traumatic to poor Jerry.
It definitely could have been. I mean, I think it is safe to say that we also think that you're high, Jerry. So I don't know if you need to announce it to Ben, but It was nice to see them together. I don't know, is this part of their growing operation? Is he just on a hike? Was he just enjoying himself? I'm not sure exactly what's going on here.
Maybe we'll jump back to the previous episode and see if this is the actual outfit he was wearing when he was listening to Dr. Amp. And so we can see if this is like the next morning from him enjoying Dr. Amp's show. I want to say that Ben there in the Great Northern, what I've heard somebody say is they see Ben Horne in the Great Northern and they say, oh, it's good that David Letterman's still getting out there and doing a top 10 list.
Oh, man. He does have the desk. He often does have a cigar. I mean, it could be, Jerry could be responding to Dr. Amp's podcast or vlog or whatever they called it.
Right.
But I don't see Jerry with a golden shovel. So I'm going to say...
Right, it hasn't arrived yet.
It hasn't. Yeah, maybe he just ordered it. That's only fair. Well, it's hard to say.
Okay, so we have jumped back. Listeners, we have jumped back to part 5, and he is wearing it's because it's at night, we can't tell the color, but that could be the exact shirt that he's wearing now in part 7. So in part 5, he's watching Dr. Amp in the woods. He's lighting up. Mm-hmm. He's definitely got that hat on.
He's got a hat. He's got the finger gloves. He does have a Hawaiian-looking shirt. He's got an iPad.
Right,
yeah.
So it's a possibility that this is supposed to be the next morning from his choking and enjoying Dr. Amp's
right.
message.
So now that we've gotten to the bottom of that, does it change anything that we've just seen?
No, that's a good point. In fact, now that I see it in color, I don't think it's the exact same shirt.
Well, it's pretty close.
Okay, so now forget it. Let's get
serious.
What I love, and this is kind of story beats, which some people say, if you're watching it for story beats and answers, you're watching it the wrong way. There's no right and wrong way to watch a television show. Last week, Hawk found these sheets of paper. This week, okay, this is what the sheets of paper are. That is a rhythm that, I'll just be honest, I can enjoy.
Yeah.
This is something that people had been predicting, mainly because Lynch gave an interview about it. He was like, well, we didn't touch upon it in Fire Walk with Me, but theoretically, Laura would have written this in her diary.
Right.
And so we have done a freeze frame right now on the main diary page that they bring up. And it says, they've never listened to my cries and I didn't want them to anyway. But there's this.
This came to me in a dream last night, and it's in clouds.
Right, and then a quote, my name is Annie, I've been with Dale and Laura, me, ? The good, underlined good, Dale is in the lodge, and he can't leave. Write it in your diary. That's what she said to me.
Uh-huh.
This is a great payoff. How did you feel about this, Mork?
Well, I was, I was hoping that it would be something along these lines, and it turns out, this is what it turned out to be. Now, real quick, my memory at this point is a little blurry based on all the episodes, Fire Walk with Me, the book, all of the missing pieces. So did we see this?
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about this. As we get into this, we're going to have to go over a bit of a contradiction or possible contradiction that happened between the show and Fire Walk with Me, and let's see if we can break it down. So we know from the show that Laura wrote a diary entry, a secret diary entry, where she talked about, I had a dream. I was in a red room with a little man and an old man there, and I kissed him and I told him who killed me. Why do we know this? Because the next door neighbor to Harold Smith was not the grandmother and her grandson, but instead was the woman who said, "Oh, you're Donna? Hey, I think Harold left this for you." She pulled out the diary pages. She read them to Andy and Agent Cooper. This was in the episode that Leland died. So, okay, so we know Laura actually did write in the secret diary, theoretically, the morning up that she died. Now, what's tricky about that is if you go to Fire Walk with Me, Laura gave her diary to Harold many days before she died. We never saw a scene in Fire Walk with Me where Laura went back to Harold's and said, "Oh, Harold, I want to write more stuff in my diary." Theoretically, she did it.
Hey, Harold.
Harold, well, maybe she visited him every day because of Meals on Wheel.
All right,
and so each time she went, she wrote something in her diary.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Now, the tricky thing about that is that once the diary ended up in Harold Smith's possession,
how did Leland get the pages?
Yeah, you couldn't imagine that Leland would have gotten any of the pages.
Right.
And so then this goes back to the original show again. The original show introduced this in the second season. It wasn't there in the first, but in the second season, they say, "Oh, Hawk found these sheets of bleached paper down from the crime scene." They did tests on them. They said, "Oh, these were pages from a diary."
Bleached paper?
Yeah, so you couldn't, there was no writing on it.
Why did someone just burn them instead of bleaching them?
This is what the show is saying, because there'd be no evidence to say, "Hey, we found these sheets of paper down from the crime scene." Then, of course, in Fire Walk with Me, when Leland and Bob is killing Laura, he holds up sheets of paper and says, "Hey, I always thought you knew it was me."
Annie says that is it in the movie or is it in Missing Pieces? Where
No,
it's
in the movie, not the Missing Pieces. In the movie, Laura has a dream / vision of Annie in her bed. Annie's wearing the flower dress, which we actually believe is Caroline Earle's dress. Boy, we're getting thick in the weeds. Hopefully everybody is Twin Peaks has a degree in Twin Peaksology.
And a machete.
From Diamond County Community College.
Well, here's one more thing, because so we're now in season 3.
Right.
Season 2, Fire Walk with Me, Annie is alive and well. Secret History of Twin Peaks, though, Annie does not really seem to appear at all.
No.
So, but she's back.
That is a great point there, Mork. Why? Because it's in this scene in tonight's episode between Sheriff Frank Truman and Deputy Chief Hawk, they refer to Annie as this girl who went into the lodge. It's interesting they don't say Norma's sister, Annie. Why is that interesting? Because in this Frost Secret History,
she's not even mentioned.
She's not mentioned as Norma's sister in any place, so it's getting crazy. Let's go ahead and read this final sheet that they give us a close-up on. It says, "The moon has been high
in the sky for hours now.
I can't sleep. It's 1:30 a.m. I'm crying so hard I can hardly breathe. Now I know it isn't Bob. I know who it is."
And so we know she knows who it is, and we know obviously what happens to her and everyone else. And I assume that as Hawk is looking at this, that he knows exactly what this means, because he was a witness to everything that transpired in terms of Leland's capture and his Leland/Bob interrogation, and ultimately his death.
Hawk was there for all of it.
What we don't know is anything really in terms of Annie. Now, Sheriff Truman
knows that his brother was there, so he goes to call Harry. And online, I saw so many people saying, "Oh, we want Michael Onkeen." They're just crying,
right? And
they're worried that some people are worried online that maybe they're just going to kill him off screen on the show.
Yeah, that would suck.
That would be terrible.
That would really, really suck. I hope that doesn't happen. But it appears, just like how Ben's office has been redecorated, that Sheriff Truman's office has gotten a few key technology upgrades.
Yeah, that desk is pretty sweet.
Got the old monitor inside the desk.
So they know they need to talk to people who saw Agent Cooper after he came out of that place. What I love about Frank Truman, and I wish this was Harry and not Frank, but anyway, is that he's gone ahead and accepted, okay, this place. He's not questioning Hawk's story of this at all.
Right.
Because Hawk wasn't there and didn't see this in Glastonbury Grove either. He's just like, okay, he went into this place. But he's accepting it, and they're saying, well, we got to talk to people who saw Cooper once he got out of it. So who do they contact via Skype? But the late, great Warren Frost, a.k.a. Doc Hayward, a.k.a.
Middlebury
Doc, on Skype. Yeah. I want somebody to grab that Skype handle real quick. That's great. Love seeing the late, great Warren Frost, Mark Frost's father, reprising his role. Got Trout. This is a good way to bring him in. He's another actor in just tonight's episode who is no longer with us. So good.
Yeah.
So good. And he does a great, I believe this is a Groucho Marx jokes about, I caught these.
In my pajamas. Yeah. No, it was great. So he does have some interesting things to say.
Oh my God. And we need to get to the interesting things he has to say, meaning that he saw what we would call as Mr. C right after what they thought was Coop exited Glastonbury Grove. And he saw Mr. C around intensive care where Audrey Horne was.
Aha.
And Mork, do you want to get to what this possibly implies?
Well, number one, it's nice to know that Audrey at least made it out of it. So that is good. But then the horrible thought, the horrible recognition is, oh my gosh. So we've talked about who Richard Horne's parents are. So this brings up the awful possibility.
Oh my God. This is truly awful. And Mork, you nailed it as soon as we had an episode with Richard Horne. You threw this out as a possibility.
But not like this.
Right, where she was in intensive care,
yeah,
and he might have done something terrible.
Not like this. So we see, apparently...
she was in a coma.
His father, Mr. C?
Oh, my God. Well, later in the episode, doesn't it seem like maybe Mr. C did something terrible, possibly rape with Diane? That's why she's so angry about the last time they saw each other at her place?
Well, it could be that, or... I don't know if that's the case, or if it could have just been like they fell in love, and Good Coop promised to, look, as soon as I get back from Twin Peaks, I'm going to retire and I'm going to propose. I mean, we don't know. Obviously,
sorry, Mark, I'm going to throw cold water on that because, well, then why would Coop have fallen in love with Annie Blackburn if he was in a relationship with?
Well, things changed, obviously, but her.
Okay.
Look, it could have been a great night, and her heart was broken because she was so in love with him, or it could have been Mr. C.
I think that's what we're supposed to take from it.
Yeah.
I don't know, because doesn't she? We'll get to that scene in a bit, and we'll break down in a bit.
Yeah.
Let me say that there's also a hope that maybe Annie Blackburn was in intensive care, and so that's who Cooper was trying to see rather than Audrey Horne, and this terrible thought that keeps popping up in our mind.
Okay, so hopefully he molested Annie while she was in a coma, not Audrey.
Annie wasn't in a coma in The Missing Pieces.
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Just terrible.
But what would he have done, I guess is the point. What would Mr. C have done with Annie? Well,
this is the trick. This is the crazy, tricky part, is should we consider The Missing Pieces a textual part of the story or not? Why? Because if you've seen Firewalk with the Missing Pieces, Annie was wearing the what we would call the Owl Cave ring. And in The Missing Pieces, a nurse took the ring off Annie and tried it on. So it was Mr. C trying to get that ring back. We don't know enough to really guess. What I would say is that this Skype call, once again, we love seeing Doc Hayward. I think this may be our only chance to hang with Doc Hayward.
Yeah, it seemed like Truman was saying goodbye.
Oh boy. If Mr. C created Richard Horne when Audrey was in a coma. This show, we thought Firewalk with Me had dark elements. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting a little dark.
Not that a child being run over in the middle of the street isn't dark. And so we have skipped over quickly. Let's get back to it. Deputy Andy doing what I call poor police work. This would never happen. You would maybe think maybe in a small town there might be something like this. But Andy should have picked up all the signs that this guy we believe is listed as Farmer in the credits was laying down about when he's saying, Andy, you got to leave now.
Right.
I love Andy, but this Farmer, you would assume, is no longer with us from the shot later in the episode when it's just his doors open. And
right, yeah, that I think is a safe assumption, and that, Richard Horne is waiting, is watching.
Or Red, possibly. Well, no, I guess Richard Horne makes more sense.
Yeah, well, either one. We don't expect Farmer to harvest any more crops ever again.
No. Oh, my goodness gracious. This episode spent so much time in Twin Peaks.
Which I love.
Yeah, I don't know if that's why I gave it a 9 out of 10, but I did love it. I did love that if you're going to tell me a story, I do like story beats. I do like narrative beats. And so, as I mentioned, they keep giving us kind of new narrative beats. And so, in a way, we might have thought we were done with Twin Peaks, but instead we come back to Ben Horne with his new secretary, Beverly, again.
Played by Ashley Judd.
And they are searching out the sound of, how would you describe the sound? I thought it was an electronic kind of hum or
yeah,
what would you call it?
It was a little bit of a tone. Yeah, it could have been coming from anywhere. And it seemed for a moment that Ben had grown more gentlemanly in his older days.
Well, Beverly, Ashley Judd, is obviously a lovely woman. He's doing kind of a tricky line here, about how flirtatious you want to be with your assistant. I thought that was my take with it.
Yeah,
but
well,
he
I
didn't.
mean,
you're
for
right.
a guy who chased his own daughter around a whorehouse, this for him is progress.
25 years of progress later,
this is progress.
Right.
So yeah.
And so another thing I just thought, anytime there's sounds in the woods, is of course one thing that we thought they were trying to develop in season 2 of Twin Peaks is Josie, her soul getting sucked into wood. Of course, the drawer pull there in the room. Later on, there were thoughts that Ben would hear a sound in one of the later episodes of season 2 and turn around and say Josie while looking at like the fireplace in his office, or then Pete would be looking at some woods. And so is it more souls? So what did you read it? Did you read it as the sound coming from the wood or from the electricity of the lamp? What did you think?
I felt I was actually thinking about maybe Josie again, even though Ben and Josie's relationship, I mean, all of Josie's relationships were a little bit false, as we came to learn later on. So I would expect if anyone was going to find her in a wall or any kind of piece of wood, that it would be Harry. But
no, good call.
But we're not seeing him. They can't exactly isolate the source of the sound, but what Beverly tells him is that they've found something very interesting, which was thanks to, my new favorite character other than Mr. C, the lovely Jade.
Jade came through and sent that key back, dropped it in the mailbox, ends up back in Twin Peaks. Number one, Vegas isn't a dream.
Right.
How could there be a dream and you physically get this key back? Or the whole thing is we live inside a dream. And the whole thing's a dream in some way. Cause
that could definitely be. But also the time period, the idea that, there was, so for a minute, so DougieCoop, who I now refer to as Cobra Coop, he is in 2003, and so maybe he's going to turn into Mr. C. But Jade mails this back, and unless, it's possible that the Postal Service is as slow.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you a second here, Mork, in that I think that whole... Wait, maybe this is taking place in 2003 because of things like the BlackBerry, but more specifically, Dougie Jones' license plate. Somebody said that if you actually go to Nevada, the number is not the year, but the month.
Right.
And so that wasn't in 03. It was saying that plate got registered in March. I love the fact that Ben Horne, is able to put 2 and 2 together and say, wait a minute, 315. This is that room that Cooper was in when he got shot. Love this.
Yeah.
You would assume somehow this might tie in to the police department some way. Love it, love it, love it. I love the strands coming together now that we're past a third of the way through, even though, as we keep talking about, new threads keep getting introduced.
New threads keep coming back. I wasn't sure. Let me ask you this, Bubba. Do you think that he was kind of downplaying his reaction to this? Because this was a guy, before this all started, Ben Horne, life was good. And you would think that this key would bring back terrible memories. I mean, his daughter, who knows exactly what's happened, but she was at least blown up.
This time in his life. Right.
I mean, all of these things.
He had a mental breakdown.
Yeah, he went nuts. He was on the cusp of being even more rich and more powerful than he was because of all the deals. They all went sideways. A federal agent was shot and almost killed in his hotel. All of these things. So I thought that for a minute he might have been kind of playing possum a little bit and pretend
with the way he might have been shaken from seeing this key. Is
I thought he'd have a bigger reaction than what he did, but who's to know? I mean, I'm sure we'll find out. I'm sure we'll learn more. But I'm glad that he got it back, and I'm glad that the post office is still as good as
they're great.
We know it is.
Now, we follow Beverly. I thought there was a small chance when we saw Beverly very early in the very first part that this was just the most minor of cameos for Ashley Judd.
Right.
But now, once again, new things being introduced. She seemingly is getting her own story about her being in a marriage with Tom Page, who, once again, it's maybe unfair of me to say he's going through chemo because he's shaved, bald, or maybe lost all his hair, and he's in a chair like this. But Tom is another brand new character.
He's another brand new character. I was kind of hoping it'd be someone that we had met before, maybe Big Ed, maybe, right. I don't know
When
who.
we saw the nurse, didn't you think, is it possible she's Harry's wife?
Oh, that's a great call. Yeah, that's a great call.
Or Harry's girlfriend somehow, because her last name was Page. Those things went through my mind. Is this another story strand? What do you imagine Tom and Beverly's part in this is? Do you imagine it's just another way to open up the world to us? Or is this going to lead somewhere new? Is this going to lead to possibly Beverly fooling around with her employer, Ben Horne?
Well, that's not exactly a new thing for Ben to do.
Right.
So I'm not sure how that would really help the larger story.
No, but to me, sorry to interrupt you again, but to me, maybe it would be a thing like in last week's episode. Last week's episode ended on what I considered a bit of an odd note in the fact that it was about Doris, really kind of helping us explain Doris. Mm-hmm. But is maybe the show trying to show us why characters do something? So why would this lovely Beverly fool around with a obviously much older man like Ben? Well, maybe the show is just trying to provide some context of like, well, this is her home life. I don't know. I would assume it's got a story beat, but I can't see it automatically.
Right. It's hard to say. And one thing that I guess I would thinking about as we're watching this, and this is probably as good a time as any to bring it up, the moment between, Ben and Beverly as they're, trying to find this out, that for me was as close as this year has gotten to having any kind of sexual tension. But seasons 1 and 2, I mean, we're full of it in so many different ways. I mean,
I'm racking my brain, Mork. Was the moment at the end of part 2 where Red shot his guns at Shelley across the roadhouse? Could that count? I'm just grasping at straws. You're right.
No, but I mean, this is as close as we've gotten.
Right. That part of a soap opera story about hearts longing for each other, that we haven't really had in this season 3 in any shape or form.
Other than Beulah, who's Mr. C was visiting.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's a good call. Good old Beulah.
Good old Beulah.
You're saying her and Mr. C had some, or what are you implying?
There was a lot of longing there. I won't say more than that. It would be unkind.
So we're gonna be kind and skip over the 2 minutes and 10 seconds worth of sweeping and get to, is it Jean-Michel Renaud?
It's Jean-Michel Renaud.
Jean, obviously played by the same actor who played Jacques Walter, and I mispronounced his last name, Olkowitz or something. I apologize for mispronouncing that, but
no, I don't think you need to. Now, Jean-Michel and Jean-Michel Renaud and Jean Renaud, they're brothers then, or what's the exact relation? Because
we have no idea. There's no way to know yet.
It seems just a little confusing if they were brothers.
I would say if you trust Mark Frost's Twitter feed, and he wasn't actually being specific. I think he possibly making a joke that they were cousins, that he was a Renaud cousin.
Yeah, I mean that would seem to make. Well, look, we're
well. The show doesn't give you any answers, so
right.
It's okay. Hopefully, everybody finds it okay if we speculate. And one of the things I wanted to speculate about is this phone call that Jean-Michel has. In that it feels like, in the original show, I never really took the Roadhouse to also operate as its own One-Eyed Jacks. But that's what it feels like it's become here based on this phone call. But then we also have this bizarre part where they're talking. So theoretically, 2 blondes were going to be sent to somebody. The guy wasn't happy with them. Mm-hmm. Now, either these 2 blondes were way too young, or my own thought was, is it possible that the 2 girls we saw kind of harassed and assaulted by Richard Horne, that they're the ones that Jean-Michel Renaud is talking about? It's kind of impossible to tell.
Yeah, I would say probably not.
Since we had the Roadhouse sweeping, the part ends this week with
no live music.
No live music, the Double R Diner. And we see somebody run in and ask, hey, anybody seen Bing? Mm-hmm. Who, once again, according to the credits, is Riley Lynch. We're guessing it's the sweeper. Let's not spend too much time on something we can't confirm.
I'm guessing that guy just thought that Riley was taking too long to sweep, just like we do. But yeah, so it's a busy night.
It's a busy night.
Heidi is
Heidi serving, Shelley serving.
Norma's at her office in booth number 4 with her rotary phone. And
is there any chance this guy looking for Bing is now going to be a new story element we need to pay attention to?
Possibly. I don't know. I think this is a good example of something that I felt was crammed into the episode that we didn't really need, and it felt like we were catching up on a lot of things, but there was so much going on, and I know we're not done. We're done with the Twin Peaks portion of it, but if you think about it, there were a lot of really large things happening that I would have rather dwelled on a little bit more than...
Anything in Twin Peaks you would have rather dwelt on more?
Well, I certainly would have liked a little bit more clarity on, well, what happened to Jerry after he called Ben? Because we don't really,
Ben is busy with Beverly. He can't worry about Jerry. Jerry, you're on your own.
Yeah, Ben is pretty busy with Beverly.
Jerry, you can't be that far off. You got a signal for your cell phone.
Right. And, obviously, I really do want to see Harry. But after Frank doesn't actually tell Harry anything. He basically...
Well, Harry's going through something rough.
No, Harry is very sick, but Frank says something along the lines of, "Oh, it's not important." It's like, well, it's important to us, but he doesn't go back to Hawk and say, you know what, Harry's not feeling well. We can't really talk about it. We have to do something else. So that just kind of stalled.
But that doesn't feel rushed. Earlier you were talking about your complaint of something.
No.
So was anything in Twin Peaks rushed? Yes or no?
Well, the thing at the end, forced, I guess. Forcing the 30 seconds, 40 seconds at the diner, 2.5 minutes of the kids sweeping, even the couple of 15-year-old prostitutes, all that stuff is fine, but at the expense of, hey, we found pages from Laura Palmer's diary, secret diary from 25 years ago, and oh, by the way, she references the missing federal agent who we haven't seen in 25 years. Like, all of that.
Before she possibly could have met him, we finally have a mention of Annie, who...
Yeah. So all that is huge,
right?
And then we just stop. So that for me, just in terms of the best use of the time,
I respectfully disagree more. I didn't feel that way. I felt like at times I have complained about, now I feel bad, obviously, but about Doris, like how is this a story beat? Give me something to hook on to. This episode in Twin Peaks, I felt many things to hook on to. Maybe I wasn't so sure about new elements being tossed in, but everything that was there was a narrative thing that I could hook into. So,
like the sweeping, I'd rather see.
I'd
rather see Hawk looking at the note for 2 minutes than the guy sweeping. I mean, that's
okay.
There's other ways I think to spend time there.
All right, so let's jump to the western side of South Dakota to Buckhorn, and let's follow Lieutenant Knox, and this is Cindy Knox, right?
Yeah.
Cynthia in the credits, I believe, and she's coming in to prove what you were being obtuse about, Mork. This is Major Briggs' body. I told you it was. I'm glad you've come around. Or are you still going to fight that it's not Major Briggs' body?
Well, but one thing that they talk about is that he's in his 40s. So,
right.
Which, okay, the body was in his 40s. Even she's saying, but he should be in his 70s. So there's some explaining to do, which has not all been done. So, yeah, I'm with you at this point.
This is implying that Major Briggs has been able to jump through time. In some ways, jump through time without aging, whereas Agent Cooper, who went into the lodge and didn't really jump out until 25 years later,
right.
He aged in the lodge. Major Briggs somehow was doing it, and he didn't age.
Yeah.
And so this is a big mystery, but the biggest new information, I believe, is the fact that the mystery man from the jail cell, the man who is a couple cells down from Bill Hastings, he is stalking.
Yeah, that's a great shot.
Stalking.
And as she starts on the phone,
Mork.
Every time they cut away to Colonel Davis, played by the wonderful Ernie Hudson, every time they cut back to
Cindy Knox, yeah.
Yeah, well, I forgot her Lieutenant Knox, or anyway,
right.
her rank. At first, it's an empty hallway.
Right.
And then, as they're chatting, and as she starts talking about the head being missing, and he's the wrong age, and then, they cut back to
Ernie Hudson.
To our Colonel.
Right.
And then next time we see Cindy, someone starts to walk down the hall.
Right. This is a horror movie trope where you see this person approaching out of focus far in the distance, but they're getting closer. They're getting closer. I was so afraid. I was afraid that Cindy was doomed. I
was afraid too. And then he's slowly coming towards them.
You can see him coming.
He's getting closer. But then... So we're getting all of this sort of backup, and so, I'm slowly becoming less and less obtuse as this conversation goes on. She does turn and look at the guy, and you can't really make out his face.
Just like you couldn't in the cell. To be honest, when he was in the cell, you could make out he had a beard,
right,
and his eyes. But yeah, this shot is still generally out of focus, still so far away.
Well, it's really out of focus, and it's also, we're talking about, Major Briggs, who doesn't have a head. Now this other guy doesn't really have a face, as far as we can tell. I'm hoping that, well, maybe this is Bob, or, I know that...
Right, Bob could have evolved into this thing. I completely think that's true.
So they're back, and they go back into the main room of the morgue, in the cold storage room, and our fella he just strolls on by. So,
he's strolling on by. It's like, holy smokes, this is trouble. And so let's get to it. The one thing is that she doesn't want anybody to touch Major Briggs's body. And she also says, okay, Buckhorn police, this probably isn't going to be your case anymore. But having said all that, I think you got to be honest and say that if that guy's around and she didn't want anybody to touch Major Briggs's body, I wouldn't be surprised if that body somehow disappears in a bit.
Well, and that guy does look, we can't make up too much about him, but he does look
about this
hungry.
Mystery man. What do you think is he in the credits? What's he listed as in the credits?
Oh, I don't know. We did not actually. Maybe that's Riley Lynch. Maybe that's Bing. Bing got sent to South Dakota.
Poor Bing.
Poor Bing is dead.
Are you intrigued by it?
That for me.
I'm giving this a 9. It confirmed, hey, this is Major Briggs' body, which admittedly I knew, but okay, it's Major Briggs' body. Now, wait, something's mystical happening with it because you're right, the body has an age. And oh, wait, this mystery man from Bill Hastings' prison cell is here. It's like everything is slowly coming together.
Yeah.
And once again, I call them these little hooks, these little story beats that I can sink my teeth into, that I can get my mind wondering about, ooh, this is interesting. Where could this go? Oh, this is a narrative story that I can enjoy.
Yeah.
I went 9 out of 10 mainly for reasons like this.
No, that was amazing.
Now, tied to South Dakota, because part of this storyline takes place in South Dakota, let's get to Gordon's office. Gordon really would be a great decorator. Nuclear blast.
Well, not just the nuclear
Ear
blast.
of Corn. We've got Metamorphosis author, Kafka on a wall.
Well, do we want to talk at all about the ear of corn and the cream corn and the potential? Does Gordon Cole have a framed portrait of Garmon Bozia on his wall? Is that what's happening here?
Oh boy, isn't that a great question? And did Gordon, who a couple parts ago was saying, I don't have any idea what's going on. In this episode, it came across like he knew a lot more that was going on. And in fact, later with Tammy, he explains a bit of what's going on. We'll get to that in a second. But first, Albert wasn't good enough by himself. He and Gordon have to go and approach good old Tammy. Now, you think it takes place in New York City? That's definitely what it looks like, these brownstones. They have them in Chicago, too, but let's say New York
Philly.
City.
Oh, it could also be Philly.
Oh, good point. Okay.
That's where they're based. So, yeah, that totally makes sense. So there's a very suave gentleman who acts like he owns the place. I don't think he does, though.
No, I didn't catch his name in the credits either. He's a man just hanging out here that maybe, if this is the next day, maybe this is somebody she picked up at the bar the other day.
Maybe Jean-Michel sent him over to Diane. Here at the Roadhouse, we go long distance.
Right. We're online. It's like Amazon. We'll take care of it. And so she doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to go see Coop. Now this, once again, I consider it a bit of a shock based on their one-sided conversations in the original series. I would have thought Cooper and Diane were really close based on all the things he said into the tape recorder. He was almost in some ways more open with Diane than he was with any other cast member in the original. But she has bad feelings. She's not down with this at all. And maybe my mind's in a dark place after seeing children killed and seeing headless corpses and everything that's happening in the show. But I thought maybe Mr. C had done her wrong.
Well, that's certainly possible, but you could also say, look, she was in love with this guy, and these guys showing up meddling.
Well, wait a minute. Why? I'm going to catch you. You say, why was she in love with Coop? What is ever proof has ever said that she was in love with him?
Just the fact that Coop, at his most charming, earnest, sweet, and kind, was talking to her for years and years and years through these tapes.
But there's nothing that's ever said that she was in love with him. In other words, you're just implying that if she heard these tapes for years and years and years, she must have been in love with him.
Well, I'd be in love with him. I'm in love with him, and he didn't send me any tapes at all. No, I mean, I don't think they had a professional relationship, a professional friendship. They were, as
we
you
would
said,
assume,
they were obviously very close. He was obviously sharing things with her that he probably wasn't sharing with many other people.
Right.
He was sharing parts of his life with her that weren't just related to the FBI and the case. I'm looking into buying some real estate,
Right.
All of that.
He actually said in one of his last conversations, and maybe his very last conversation with Diane on the old show, he was talking about Annie Blackburn's smile and how he was tickled pink with Annie.
Right. So, I read this as it's possible that something awful did happen with Mr. C, and it would make sense for Mr. C to do something so terrible,
right,
and disgusting. But this could also just be, you know what? It's too much of it. You're ripping open a wound, Albert and Cole, by showing up here and taking me back into this place. I've moved on. I don't want to think about this. This is in the past, and they're forcing her to confront it. I mean, that's a tough thing to do. And Diane is not a shrinking violet.
No, she smokes on a plane. Are you allowed to smoke even on a private plane? I guess maybe you would
FBI. Be. Sure, why not?
Okay, sure.
Who are they going to call to arrest her?
Almost everybody. Almost everybody that Diane has a scene with, she says F you.
Yeah.
So F you Albert, F you Gordon, F you Tammy.
Good old Tammy. What's your name again?
Mr. C didn't actually get an F you.
He did not get an F you.
But why don't we talk about Tammy, who I thought had a real funny reveal. Hey, I'm on the plane too, everybody.
Right.
So she brings over this thing that people have been talking about online. It appears that Mr. C's ring finger, the prints are reversed. And then Gordon mentioned something that we didn't actually mention on our podcast, but that is when Gordon, Albert, Tammy, and the other people went in to see Mr. C the first time, Gordon noticed that Mr. C didn't say, I'm very, very, he said, I'm, the word very backwards, very happy to see you. And so then Gordon explains it by having Tammy put out her hands and then flip them over and pointing out that the ring finger, the wedding ring finger, is the second finger in this sentence. I'm very, very happy to see you again, old friend, which is 10 words. And then once again, the spiritual finger, the spiritual mound, is the ring finger, and theoretically, that's why it's reversed. Albert's first thought is some podunk in South Dakota screwed this up.
Right.
But it turns out that might be just kind of code for Blue Rose people who've had this metaphysical experience.
Right. So this is one of those things where it raises questions in terms of Cole. We've already seen him.
Right, that's a good call.
We've already seen him in terms of, okay, what can he hear, what can he not hear? He's clearly aware of a little bit more than what's going on than what he pretends. Now, I mean, you have a guy who, as long as we've known him, you've had to shout and, really yell to get his attention. And he's picked up on something so quick, so fast that, that was something that was said to him when he met Mr. C a few weeks back, or whatever, a few days ago in the chronology of the show.
We know that in the history of Mr. C being out in the world, he apparently was down in Rio.
Sure.
Living in a lovely doctored photo.
Yeah, it was a lovely, apparently whoever doctored the fingerprints also doctored this photo.
Used some Photoshop.
Definitely did a little Photoshop. Diane is listening to all this, and
I would almost call her world weary. Like, she's hearing all this, she's blowing that smoke out, and she really doesn't want to be here. She really doesn't want to see the person who they're saying is Agent Cooper. Now, later she realizes that's not him, there's something different, but she doesn't want to be here. She goes into this room. Is it the room that changes Mr. C's voice or the recording device? Because in this scenario,
I don't
what happens to
voice,
Mr. C?
Yeah, I don't remember his voice being this distorted when
he talks to the warden.
Yeah,
it's not then.
Yeah, so that was a little, that was interesting. I don't know exactly what it means yet, but in this in and of itself, I mean, Diane, as far as we know, was never a special agent.
Right.
She was.
We didn't.
She worked for the FBI, but she wasn't an agent. So to send her alone into a room to interrogate a suspect feels like it's a little out of bounds. I mean, I'm glad it happened because it's a cool scene.
Yeah, I love the reflection of Diane in the glass, and it's like her spirit is floating there next to Mr. C. I thought it's great.
Yeah.
I thought it was, because of what Gordon had pointed out on the plane, I expected Mr. C's second word to be in reverse again, but it did not appear that way at all. And Diane, once again, is saying, you remember the last time you saw me.
Right.
And this, Mr. C implies that it was at her place. Once again, that's why one of the reasons why my mind goes to dark places like sexual assault.
Yeah, well, it's certainly possible. We'll find out. I think, for me, Diane being... I guess it's just more fun to think about that, she was in love with the guy and he disappeared and she's pissed and, she cut her hair into a bob and started drinking. And
so in your scenario then, did she see Cooper before he went to Twin Peaks? And that's the night she's referring to?
For me, that makes more sense because if this guy disappeared and, our last photo is him striding across the infinity pool in Rio. I mean, this guy disappeared. So if a former FBI agent visited and did something horrible or wonderful to a former colleague of his, who after he had disappeared, wouldn't she say something to Gordon or some of her colleagues? Oh my God, Cooper's alive. He's here. I saw him. And obviously that hasn't happened. So my gut is that this happened before he drove into Eastern and or Washington State. But
I disagree. Let's put this in We'll put this in Major Briggs's belly, and we'll see if you're being obtuse again. One thing I did love about this scene, when she was saying, "Who are you?" I have to be honest, that gave me a strong vibe of Fire Walk with Me when Laura was grabbing Bob's face and saying, "Who are you? Who are you really?"
Right.
Just as unsettling, just as disturbing, for lack of a better word. Once again, strong scenes.
Yeah.
We go out into the parking lot where Gordon wanted some time alone with Diane, and this is where I read the scene to read that she's saying, that's not him.
Oh, yeah.
She even said something's missing, which is a great phrasing.
Yeah, well, she says, that is not the Dale Cooper that I know.
Well, she says it isn't time passing or how he's changed. So it's not that he's changed, that's not him. You're right.
Right. So, look, we have to see how it plays out. This, for me... It was like, oh man, I hope this is not the great Laura Dern saying goodbye, because I want to see more of Diane.
Because you think she's fulfilled her duty in that she said that's not him, and so she could just fade away.
Right. I mean,
especially if she's not a current active federal agent. Maybe this is the last we see of Diane.
I hope that's not the case. It kind of feels like it, but
I have to be honest, it didn't occur to me, but I guess narratively she could just go away now.
Yeah, she definitely could. They're having an exchange. Cole is he being obtuse? Is he taking after Mork and being obtuse because he's getting information from all these other people? He's not sharing with them everything that he knows.
No. I don't know. See, once again, I'm a bit thrown as to what we as an audience are supposed to think that Gordon knows because of the last time we saw him, and I believe it was actually somewhere around this parking lot too, he kept saying, I don't have any idea what's going on here.
Right.
And yet
now he knows the secret code with Tammy Preston and the fingers and all of that stuff. Well, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think that Cole is going to... I am afraid that we're going to learn some things about Cole that, Denise, played by David Duchovny, hinted at, very early on in season 3 as time goes on. I hope...
do me a favor. Say what you mean.
Oh, what I mean is somehow I feel like Cole might not. I feel like Coop and Good Coop, Cobra Coop, and Cole. By the time they reunite, they may be on opposite sides of the table. Something tells me that there's a lot more to what Cole is doing or that he knows about, and that maybe Coop in his 25-year absence has realized something doesn't fit. Maybe it's Cole. I don't know. This is kind of like worst case scenario thinking because I love Cole, but it just feels like there's so many things that he's not telling all of the people around him who he should be completely open with. So
all right.
We'll see where that goes.
I like that a lot.
We'll see where that goes.
We'll also have to Mr. C where Bad Coop is going. Because man. Mr. C, we pointed it out a couple episodes ago when he had his infamous call and he mentioned Mr. Strawberry.
Yes.
So it turns out the warden, I should point out, if anybody listened to the audiobook of Mark Frost's The Secret History of Twin Peaks, this actor is the main narrator of the archivist in the audiobook.
The archivist who we, at the end of the book,
we find out is Major Briggs.
Right.
So the warden, we kind of got a hint that when Mr. C said Mr. Strawberry a couple episodes ago that this had a strong reaction for the warden of this penitentiary. Turns out this warden is done something dirty. Mm-hmm. The dog leg is part of code for it. Mm-hmm. Mr. Strawberry is theoretically maybe somebody the warden killed. And so Mr. C is able to blackmail his way out of the jail with Ray.
Exactly. He and Ray, they get, and a friend in the glove compartment. Is that a gun?
Oh, that's what I thought, of course. Yeah.
Well, and did he ask for, he doesn't want his machine gun or his 5 pounds of heroin back that they took from him? I mean, I'm sure he can replace it readily, when he's back in the free world, but might make life a little easier. So they're getting the heck out of Dodge.
And so that is it. Do you have any guess as to where the roadshow of Mr. C and Ray would be going?
I mean, the only thing that was surprising to me about that was that he, number one, is bothering to take Ray anywhere. Ray...
Well, hold on. Let's once again, plot check me, everybody. Mm-hmm. But Ray knew Bill Hastings' secretary, Betty, mm-hmm. and Mr. C wanted him to get coordinates from Betty. So... theoretically, he just needs those coordinates from Ray, but maybe he thought if he gets Ray out of prison, Ray will give him up.
Well, but also, maybe Ray doesn't have reason to know of what Mr. C did to Ray's girlfriend, but they definitely were plotting against Mr. C.
Right.
So it's surprising to me that, one, Mr. C didn't get they've been about 5 cells apart this whole time, apparently. Mr. C is able to, by punching a telephone in certain sequence,
right.
Make all sorts of crazy things happen.
But he couldn't escape. The one thing about their escape that I found a bit odd was that so many guards were in on it. I guess the warden wouldn't have a choice.
Yeah, he's blackmailing the warden. But what I was going to say was it's surprising that he kept him, that he didn't just talk to Ray in the middle of the night and say, what are the coordinates, or kill him, or do something, but that they're leaving together. So I assume we'll spend a little bit more time in South Dakota. Maybe we'll go visit Mr. Hastings. I don't know, but maybe
we haven't seen Mr. Hastings since, I believe, part 2. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. So we'll end up back and they're in a different part of the state. I mean, they're in Buckhorn. It's a different part of the state than the federal prison, right?
If we can trust the maps we've seen on the show, Buckhorn is far west South Dakota, while the penitentiary is far east South Dakota. If I'm wrong about that, I'll give anybody a 2-night stay at the Great Northern, all accommodations. But it's a bit tricky.
Yeah.
A bit tricky. So we have one last location, and it's a location that people either seem to love DougieCoop, or they're frustrated with DougieCoop, and they're like, we can't take this anymore.
This scene was a little frustrating. I mean, the very end, and we'll get there, but we start off, and
Janie's coming in to get her husband.
She's coming in, and this is, I presume, this is right after she negotiated with the loan sharks.
Yeah, that's what I would assume too.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of. She comes in and we see the statue, the lawman statue.
She's probably waiting for Dougie to come down so she can pick him up, but Dougie is still not able to function that way to know, okay, I should go downstairs. My wife's here to pick me up.
Dougie's still not able to function at all. He's drawing,
not really.
He's drawing on like the mat of the desk and not the actual paper. One thing I noticed with the statue, it looks like the lawman statue is aiming his gun towards the building.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know who the sculptor was, but my wife...
Well, they could have turned that anywhere. You didn't sculpt it there at the building. They're like, let's put it here.
He was aiming at the building.
Right. So the idea was, hey, anybody leaves early, this lawman's going to stop you from doing it.
Don't even try. So she storms in.
Now, Tony is there, his coworker Anthony.
Tony Sinclair. Played by the wonderful, newly hair implanted Tom Sizemore.
And he must know that DougieCoop has ratted him out. He must know something's going on. But of course, I actually giggled when he finds out, oh wait, cops are coming? Oh, I got something else. That paperwork. I forgot to do it. Let me go do that.
Yeah, this is not the kind of insurance professional I would like to deal with. So DougieCoop is working away. DougieCoop's in his new black suit, black tie, FBI. A couple of very funny policemen come in
to ask about, hey, your car blew up. What's going on?
Well, they don't even tell him. They're asking, where is your car? When's the last time?
Do you think this is the way real police would do this? They want to know, or I think that would be a question. Your car blew up, and why haven't you come to us? And so maybe that you do want to slow play it if you're the police.
All right, that's a good call. I mean, there's 3 of them. I don't know how many they need to.
Well, hold on. 3 people did die, so it's not just that your car blew up. It's your car blew up. 3 fatalities.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, so they've definitely got some questions. But just like she handled the loan sharks, Janie Jones is not afraid of 1, 2, or even 3 of Las Vegas's finest.
I tell you, we need Janie in the White House. She gets stuff done. She doesn't take any crap.
She would not mess around.
Right. I was not sure about Janie. In previous episodes, I had mentioned, well, I'm not even sure she really cares about her husband, Dougie. Yeah. Last week, like many with part 6, I did start to turn and get more in her.
Yeah.
And did start to see her care about Dougie. She may not seemingly ever get Dougie to the doctor, to the hospital, this guy. How come the cops don't say, sir, are you okay? But she is fighting for her man. She's going to get that money. She's going to get Sonny Jim to college. This is somebody I could dig. This is a new character I can get behind.
Yeah, no, she's great. I would love to see her, not because she can't do far more than this, but I would love to see her hanging out with Shelley and Norma and Heidi.
She would fit in well
at the
there.
Double R,
Well, to be honest, if Norma's sick of doing the books there at the booth,
Janie will step right in.
Janie will be like, get out of there. Wait, you didn't pay your tip? Let's go. Come on. You're charging us how much for waffles here?
Exactly.
Let's do this.
She would go in. Now, I still don't get the whole problem with $375 extra $1,000 that Dougie brought home. She's still pretending that there are some issues that, she's going to put the money away for Sonny Jim, and she's got to hide it, and there's all this.
Well,
so
I don't think...
I'm okay with it.
Okay. But, sorry, what I was going to say is I don't think we're ever going to find out the history of real Dougie Jones. But based on what little we know about him...
It's problematic.
Disappearing for days.
Yeah.
She, in her mind, hasn't put 2 and 2 together to realize, okay, Dougie Jones has been replaced by DougieCoop.
Right.
And so when she's kind of being a taskmaster, like, hey, you don't touch this money, you don't go to this anymore, it's because Dougie Jones did do that stuff, right? And so whether DougieCoop or Dougie Jones, sadly, Janie Jones has got to lay down the law.
Janie definitely has Janie's captain of this ship. So... Actually, speaking of Janie at the Double R, what if Jade joined them as well?
You love Jade too much, Mork.
I don't know who does the diners hiring Norma, but I'm just saying there are 2 people in Las Vegas who would make great employees. So they're walking out and they're having this conversation, and then something kind of big, something kind of crazy that was started last episode.
Oh yeah. He got that envelope with the dot, which said these are the 2 people you got to take care of. And what is absolutely...
His ice pick was broken.
With his ice pick broken, he had to go with a gun, but he wanted to make sure of it, so he was going to get incredibly close. He was going to get super close to DougieCoop and take him out and not have any mistakes. But DougieCoop, with a little help from the
lightning tree sponsored by T-Mobile.
Man, I loved it when the lightning tree sponsored by T-Mobile showed up.
That was great. So it wasn't clear exactly what happened because the tree is saying take his hand off, squeeze his hand off, sorry. And he's actually, does he get a finger? Because there's a little piece of flesh. It feels
like a chunk of flesh, like the kind we saw in South Dakota.
Like the kind we saw in South Dakota. Also,
in Bill Hastings' trunk. It was almost like the same chunk of flesh.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what that was, but we see some of old Coop's moves. We see some FBI, he wrestles the guy down to the ground, which admittedly for the Double L, little lunatic, doesn't have that far to go, but he does get him down on the ground. He's completely in control. He's chopping the guy in the windpipe.
Right. This is how old Agent Cooper treated Nancy, Blackie's sister, when he did the raid to rescue Audrey at One-Eye Jack's.
Now, did the little lunatic get away?
Oh, he totally scampered. He totally got away. Nobody tried to stop him. But this is a fun moment in a episode, once again, I really liked. I love it when DougieCoop's like, enough of you.
I love it, but then I'm hoping he's got to wake up. I mean, like, he's got to come out of it. He's he's starting to do all this stuff, but
that's what's so tricky. Yeah,
he's just not there yet. So
this is just what's so tricky. In part 3 and 4, I was kind of high on DougieCoop. In part 5, I was still high on DougieCoop. In part 6, I wasn't. And so I'm just going to lay my biases out there. When DougieCoop I find him humorous, or I find him really emotional, like in his scenes with Sonny Jim, or now Kung Fu Grip DougieCoop.
Cobra
I
Coop.
love them. In what I would call most of his scenes with Janie have not really had that emotion or haven't been funny and even haven't had the pathos. And so I haven't, maybe that's why in part 6 I was a bit down on some of those. But this DougieCoop, who is taking care of business, who the witnesses are just singing the praises of, this is a guy I'm willing to accept. Don't you believe, Mork, that we're with DougieCoop?
Well,
at least 5-6 more episodes.
Oh, man. It could certainly play out that way, but I just, there's all these things that keep happening. They're like, oh gosh, this would maybe shock him back into, who he was and who he used to be, and you're right. I mean, at this point, at this rate, it may last, 5 or 6 more episodes, but I want him back now.
I do too. This is a weird thing that I'm just going to talk about myself, and I'm going to reference the Harry Potter film. So, in the Harry Potter book. So, in the final book, and in the first of the final 2 movies, Harry Potter was on this long journey to find these things that were important to defeating evil, for example. And so many people thought, oh, Harry's just wandering in the woods. It's just taking forever. And I kind of thought to myself, even though I thought, boy, he was just wandering in the woods, it was taking forever, I thought to myself, to defeat the ultimate evil, it wouldn't be easy, and you kind of do need to show how difficult it is. I'm not always the greatest fan of DougieCoop, but I would say that if you're going to escape the Black Lodge, it shouldn't be easy. Now, maybe it could be difficult to escape the Black Lodge in a way that's maybe doesn't test people quite like DougieCoop tests people. But in some ways, I do accept that part of it. That okay, you've been in the Black Lodge 25 years. You don't just hop out and go back to normal.
I give you that, and I agree with that 100%, but I would rather see this is our hero, and I'd rather see our hero's struggles be something that's challenging him when he's at full strength.
Okay.
Not him just trying to get back to full strength.
Well, I'm with you. I just don't see it happening. Now, the little girl noticed that Icepick smelled funny. People online already tweeting out, is it possible he smelled like burnt engine oil?
Right. Well, okay, so is this something? So we see this piece of flesh being taken off of the gun, and we saw our little lightning tree, the new arm, sponsored by T-Mobile.
Right.
We're not sponsored by T-Mobile, just the arm.
Right.
Saying, squeeze his hand off. Now, and our friend, the assassin, he has these weird connections to Mr. C.
Does have a weird connection.
Could the tree be talking to the assassin and not Coop in some way?
That's a good call. I wouldn't naturally take it that way based on how in the casino and in the case files, it has felt like he's been getting help from the Black Lodge, but boy, you never know.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So, but they take a little piece of flesh.
Yeah, they bag the flesh, and that's the episode. That's part 7.
Yeah, so we'll see where that ends up, hopefully, and and maybe another thing will. What if that also has Major Briggs' fingerprints on it? Now, maybe then I'm not so obtuse.
Boy, you're totally obtuse.
It's
Mork.
coming.
We're renaming you.
It's coming.
We're going to get the obtuse as your Skype handle.
No.
So, part 7. Next week, everybody, we're going to be back. We're going to be talking about part 8, and that's, I believe, our last episode before we get to the 4th of July, where we're going to have a 2-week break. Next week's part 8 is entitled Got a Light? A lot of people smoke on this show, so
not enough people smoke on this show.
Oh, please! I think enough people do smoke on this show. We got to stop people from smoking.
Who do we think that will be?
Who's saying "Got a Light"?
Yeah,
that's a good call.
Shelley, Audrey.
We still haven't seen Audrey. We still haven't actually seen Big Ed. We haven't seen Donna, if Donna's still alive or in this at all. There are a lot of characters who
we haven't seen much of. Amy Shields.
No,
we haven't seen.
But I'll say Audrey. Sure, why not?
Okay.
Who's your guess?
I mean, I'd be hoping for Audrey. I'm gonna say it's someone that Jerry's doing business with.
Okay, that is a good guess.
I don't know who it could be.
Do you think Jerry's one of his people he's selling medical marijuana to is good old Tom?
I would hope so, for God's sakes. Yeah,
Tom Beverly's husband.
I would hope so, and I hope Dr. Amp is giving some,
throwing some business to Jerry as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we haven't spent much time with Nadine. Boy, so many people. There's still so many hours. I mean, let's be honest. There are still 11 hours left in this wonderful season 3, and that's about the length of a typical cable TV show nowadays. So
that is true.
So it's like we have one full season left
this is
of
all
Better
prologue.
Call Saul.
This is all prologue.
This is.
I'll take it.
We're going to end today's podcast with another real-life Twin Peaks celebrity encounter.
Oh, here we go.
One of our great listeners at ShadowCatBex, Rebecca, she sent in a real-life encounter. This is wonderful. Listeners, if you have them, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/double-P podcasts, and tell us about them. So, Mork, tell Rebecca's celebrity encounter.
This is her celebrity Twin Peaks encounter, and you don't get much bigger than this. Rebecca writes, I saw Mr. C, DougieCoop, Cobra Coop, Mr. Kyle MacLachlan at a restaurant in New York City several years ago. It was right around the time he was on Sex and the City. My group was 4 or 5 ladies and a gay man. We walked past his table, all with dreamy eyes, and he said hi and waved. And we swooned. FYI, he is a silver fox in real life.
Heck yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Rebecca.
Good work, Rebecca. Way to
swoon.
I was going to say, way to distract Kyle MacLachlan, but what if she was distracting Mr. C? Oh, no.
Oh, this is the last we'll ever hear from Rebecca.
Oh, no.
I hope not. Rebecca, tell us that you're okay. Obviously, this already happened years ago, but still, we want to know you're okay.
For everyone, my name is Bubba. You can find me on Twitter at FitandTrim. That's FITTENTRAM at FitandTrim on Twitter.
Mork is at Extraordinary. That's extraordinary with a W in front of the final R.
We'll see you next week for Part 8 on Twin Peaks: The Gifted
and the Damned.
Sweeps!